All right, July 18 edition of the PFT PM podcast, 6 days away from the return of PFT Live for yet another season. That's a show that goes all the way back to January of 2011 when I had a lot of black hair and the show was very different. It was digital, half hour or so. Sometimes it would linger a little bit longer. Then it became a radio show, then it became a TV show, and now it's Peacock show plus Sirius XM 85 plus Sky Sports. I still get texts and emails. When are you going to be back on Sky Sports? How many different ways can I say it? We're on hiatus. We're not anywhere except here for the PFT PM podcast, which is on YouTube, the full episodes and clips. You'll see clips at PFT. So it's pretty much anywhere and everywhere. Also where we get your podcasts. The episodes are loaded up there. We got 4 more to go. We got 4 more coaches on the top 10 list. I'll get to that later. For now, and there's a lot to get to today. I got some notes for a change. Sometimes I'll just write a few words. Today, I got more than a few words because I want to make sure I get to everything that I need to talk about. And just before I came on, I caught wind of something that happened yesterday, and I'm still trying to get some details on as it relates to the running backs. It looks like the running backs are getting serious about doing something, taking some sort of collective action. Austin Eckler, the Chargers running back, was on with Zach Gelb last night, CBS Sports Radio, saying you poked the bear and we have to do something now. Wants answers from ownership about the running back position. Well, I don't think ownership is who you have to go to. I don't think ownership cares. Ownership owns the team. It's others who are making the decision that the running back position isn't valued the way that other positions are. And I asked somebody about it today, somebody who knows very well how the dynamics work, somebody who's been involved in the NFL for a long time. I can't disclose my sources. You're just going to have to trust me on this one, that I'm not getting input from, guy who sweeps the floor, right? This is an actual real person whose name you would instantly recognize, I just said, look, because I got my theories, and I've had theories for years as to the running back market. What's going on? Why is the running back market depressed? Here's the response I got. Fundamentally, people don't think it's a position that leads to greater expected points and surplus value. Surplus value is the key. It's a salary cap league with finite resources, and that matters. So teams will spend on quarterback, receiver, pass rushers, and corner. Those are the positions that provide the most surplus value. You can blame Mike Shanahan and the analytics community. That's what I was told. And analytics has a lot to do with it. Look, this is how much are we paying and what are we getting for a lower end running back? How much more are we paying for a higher end running back? And what are we getting by way of difference? Are we getting enough surplus value for what we're paying over and above the baseline, average, random guy who can just do whatever needs to be done? No name guy who comes in and plays special teams and maybe can run the ball effectively if you need to, and maybe you need 4 yards out of him and you get 3. Okay, fine. We can consistently get something, but we're not paying much. So we can divert the resources to quarterback, corner, rush, and receiver. And I asked about receiver because it feels like receivers moving in that direction where the supply maybe outweighs the demand. All these great receivers that we see every year in the draft because of all the 7-on-7 camps out there where quarterbacks are throwing the ball and throwing the ball and throwing the ball over and over and over again at a young age. Somebody is running the pass routes. Somebody is catching the passes. Somebody is developing as a receiver. But I was told the surplus value is still greater for the receiver position. That great receiver that you pay a lot for. Now, maybe the bar is high as to what it takes to be that high surplus value receiver, but that's why the market hasn't collapsed. In the NFL, there isn't that one guy that just screams out, you got to pay him $20 million a year because all you have to do is give him the ball and it's a touchdown or a first down. So that's the fundamental problem. Now, what are the solutions? How do you change that? Can you change it? And as Austin Eckler recognized last night, this is all a product of processes that the players agreed to. The players, through their union, agreed to this system. And this gets back to the issue of all shapes and sizes and positions of players thrown into one bucket for the purposes of collective bargaining. 4 years ago, there was an effort to break out the running backs as their own bargaining unit, so they could have a seat at the table where the specific necessities and interests and realities of their position could be negotiated as part of the broader structure. And you could argue every position should have its own bargaining unit. Now, that would complicate life for the teams. See, it's better for the teams because in this system, you're paying less to everyone. You have one pot of money, and then it's up for the players through their agents to figure out who gets what. And the teams will value certain positions differently. Quarterbacks get more. And as I've said recently multiple times, quarterbacks still subsidize the rest of the team because the best quarterbacks are still worth more than they're getting, but they get less because the rest of the team needs to eat too. The rest of the team needs to have salary cap space available to them. But one very simple solution would be to have running backs with their own bargaining unit, and then they get to go to the table independent of what the union has agreed to, independent of what the league has agreed to, and come up with their own structure. That's one solution. The other solution that I've seen plenty of people suggest, but it would have to be bargained between the league and the union, a quicker path to free agency for running backs, 2 years instead of 3. See, pre-2011, it wasn't 2 years to free agency. It was 2 years to a renegotiation. Now it's 3 years to a renegotiation. Now, if you're drafted, it's 4 years to free agency. How about 3 or 2 years to free agency? What that would do, though, it may cause teams to not spend draft capital on running backs because they know that after 2 or 3 years, they're going to have to treat them as free agents and figure out what to do, franchise tag, pay them more money, whatever. So I don't know that that would be a great solution. I like the idea that Chris Sims came up with as he and I were discussing the issue months ago when Austin Eckler had requested permission to shop himself via trade, but ultimately couldn't work out a deal because nobody wants to pay him. And it's nothing against him personally. Nobody wants to pay him given the position he plays, the kind of money he wanted. Sims made the point, and I've been pulling that thread since then, that there should be a league-wide fund that pays running backs based on the yardage they gain, the touchdowns that they score, and whatever other objective factor you would want to put in there. They already have a performance-based pay system that rewards players just for playing. If you're a low draft pick and you end up starting every game and playing 98% of the snaps, you get a nice big check. I've talked about that. Why not come up with something like that just for running backs? Because they are the straw that stirs the drink in many respects. They create excitement. Fantasy football, we gotta have the great running backs. The running backs make things interesting. People buy running backs jerseys, they become star players. So if you can pay them as they're earning, as they're performing, that's the way to do it, because so many running backs become great at a time when there isn't a damn thing they can do about it financially. Look at Jonathan Taylor. He was the consensus #1 pick in fantasy last year, and he had injuries that kept that from coming to fruition, but he was operating under what would have been, and what was year 3 of a second-round slotted contract. Minimum salary. Beyond round 1, you get minimum salaries for 4 years, and you get a signing bonus that is higher or lower based upon where you get picked. But you're not making much money. And you're creating this tremendous output. Why not reward those players as they go? But the problem is this. Who's going to make that happen? Who's going to be the one to say, we need to do something here? Is it the league? Is it the union? A union that represents the interests of all players? This is why we need a bargaining unit that is simply for running backs. Now, here's where it gets interesting. I've heard some chatter that the running backs are in the process of trying to come together and come up with a plan. And Austin Eckler generally and indirectly alluded to this when he was on with Zach Gelb on Monday night. I think the running backs are talking among themselves. And it's even possible that the running backs who were in negotiations for long-term contracts yesterday, the franchise tagged players. Now, I don't think Tony Pollard and the Cowboys were ever close to a long-term deal, but for Saquon Barkley and the Giants, Josh Jacobs and the Raiders, there were some talks. And it's possible that the players decided we're just not going to agree to these deals. We're going to go ahead and push this thing forward. Now, look, they're not under contract until they accept the franchise tender. They can hold out of training camp. It's not a holdout. They're not doing anything wrong. They can't be fined. They can't be sanctioned in any way. The only risk they're taking is the franchise tag gets rescinded and they become free agents. And then I guess they would say good until they see what's out there. See, that's a problem. That's why I've been talking about this possible removal of the franchise tag. from Barkley and Jacobs. They're going to get 10.1 million somewhere else at this point. And the closer we get to week 1, the lesser the likelihood that they're going to find 10-1 out there from someone else. But the running backs need to figure out how they can flex their muscle and get the attention. You got to make it a priority. It's the squeaky wheel. The running backs got to figure out how to become the squeaky wheel. And they're doing a lot of squeaking. And those of us in the media are paying attention. And the fans are starting to pay attention. And the running backs are definitely paying attention. But is anyone else? Are the teams paying attention? Are the owners paying attention? Is the union paying attention? What is going to be the catalyst to get someone to say, we better fix that wheel? We better find the oil can and make that wheel not squeak. So what can the players really do at this point? See, they missed an opportunity, folks, and we've talked about this in the past. It happened a couple of years ago, 2021. There was a concerted effort to get players to withhold services during the voluntary offseason program. And it worked to a certain extent, and it caused some negotiations about reduction in workouts and reduction in intensity, but that's kind of fallen apart. It's hard to get the players to collectively do anything because it's every man for himself. So if, for example, the running backs had decided league-wide, or at least tried to do this back in March, nobody's showing up for the offseason program. Nobody. No running backs are showing up. Good luck having football practice without running backs there. Well, here's the problem. Late April rolls around, here comes the draft. Then comes undrafted free agency. You got all these players who are young and trying to prove themselves. 5th round pick. I got to make the roster. Undrafted free agent. I got to make the roster. Oh, all those other guys aren't going to show up? Well, that's just an opportunity for me to show what I can do. Sorry, guys, I'm trying to get paid. I'm trying to make a roster. You got first world problems. I got third world problems. I'm not on the team. I'm number 88 on the roster right now. I got to move my way up to 53 or higher, or I'm playing in the USFL or the XFL or the whatever the hell FL next year, and I don't want to do that. So that's where it becomes difficult. And their agents are going to advise them based upon their interests. The agent wants to develop that player into a guy who gets paid good money at some point, a guy who gets an NFL salary now. You get 3% of nothing versus 3% of whatever the guy can make. And if he can lay the foundation for a reasonable second contract, so be it. But it's going to take something like that. And I know holdouts are possible. Austin Eckler mentioned holdouts and hold-ins. Holdouts would be expensive because the CBA has been rigged to make it expensive on a daily basis. And for veterans under their second contracts, you can't even waive the fines. You know, it used to be guy holds out for a couple of weeks, whatever, and then shows up and you never hear anything about the fines. More often than not, the team just forgives the fines. Now you can't under the second contract. Under the first contract, yeah. But this is kind of a second contract problem. And I think once you get into that 5th-year option, I don't know if that counts as a second contract or not. It's something I need to take a look at. But the bottom line is holdouts get expensive. Hold-ins are hard to pull off as well because what are you getting? What are you getting? If you're Austin Eckler and you show up and you say, I'm not practicing until I get a new contract, and they say, we're not giving you a new contract, it ends at some point. We went through that last year with Roquan Smith in Chicago. It's one thing to do a hold-in where everyone knows there's eventually going to be a contract. But at some point, there isn't going to be a contract. We got to get ready for football season. We got to get ready for the games. The hold-in doesn't work unless the team agrees with the assessment that a contract needs to be done. And see, here's the problem with Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs. And I've written about this and I've talked about it. This mid-July deadline, it removes whatever they could get by holding in or holding out. Because, hey, all right, you win. All right, you win. We'll give you a long-term deal. Oh, wait, we can't. We can't give you a long-term deal by rule. See, the system is rigged in favor of the teams in so many different ways. So it's going to make it hard for the running backs to do anything when it comes to joint collective activity. I encourage them to try, but be careful. You got to understand you're going to undermine your own interests. And hey, it's one of the reasons why work stoppages don't work for NFL players. Guys don't want to give up their own interests for some future player years down the road. You're going to hurt yourself to help somebody else in the future. The best way that guy in the future can help himself, and I've said this many times over the years, there's a chapter about it in Playmakers. Running backs should play different positions. The great young players, because think about what happens, youth football. You get these bozos coaching youth football. All due respect to the coaches who aren't bozos who coach youth football, but I can speak from experience. Most of the people who coach youth football are bozos. They don't know what they're doing. So what do? You got one kid who is head and shoulders above everybody else. Just give him the ball. Let him run rings around everybody. That's where the running backs come from. The best athletes, when the kids start playing football, get the ball in their hands, because what? You don't have high-level passing games when you're 8, 9, 10 years old. Give the ball to the best kid and just let him run rings around everybody. And then you get pigeonholed as a running back. High school running back, and hey, high school running back, you get the glory. You're the guy running for the touchdowns. You're the guy that's making the team go, the most important player on the team. And then by the time you get to college, you're just a piece in that machine. And by the time you get to the NFL, you're an interchangeable part. And you are undervalued. And it's nothing against you personally, it's the position. So when that great young athlete who is clearly dominant begins to show himself at the youth level, that's when somebody's got to say, we need to get you to a different position. You know, I made this point after Jim Brown died. Jim Brown today, given the fact that he could do anything and everything athletically, Jim Brown today, if there's another Jim Brown, he's going to be a quarterback. Why wouldn't you make him a quarterback? Look at Lamar Jackson. Imagine Jim Brown as a quarterback. Look at Justin Fields. Imagine Jim Brown. Look at the way Jim Brown ran through and around anyone that was trying to tackle him. You put throwing ability on top of that, and let's just assume he would have passing ability. You know, as a great lacrosse player, you've got the hand-eye coordination that allows you to move a ball from point A to point B. Let's assume he'd be able to throw. Jim Brown would be a quarterback now. Get that kid who is a tremendous dominant athlete away from running back and get him to another position. Ben Tate, second-round pick out of Auburn, 2009-ish, of the Texans. I think later signed with the Browns as a free agent and did not get a good deal. He said at one point, if I had to do it all over again, I'd play a different position. I'd be a safety. So, look, it's not going to help any of the guys now. But to the extent we're thinking about future running backs, the message is don't play running back. And if enough guys gravitate away from running back, the supply starts to drop. The demand is still what it is. And the handful that don't gravitate from running back to another position add the surplus value. If enough guys choose not to play running back, that handful that is still really good and plays running back is going to stand out more, and the surplus value is going to be there. Here's another practical way to deal with it. And this is something Jonathan Taylor should consider, because he falls into this category right now. He's got 3 years in. Hold out like Ezekiel Elliott did. Just don't show up. Ezekiel Elliott held out after 3 years, and it was ugly and it was contentious. But he ultimately got a contract that was so good, it was structured in a way the Cowboys had to keep him longer than they would have. They would have cut him last year, but for the fact that his salary for 2022 became fully guaranteed in March of 2021. It was not just an every year vesting, it would vest for next year. And once the Cowboys got past that is when the Cowboys said, see you later, Zeke. Because remember what the Cowboys did to DeMarco Murray? 2014, he set the single season rushing record for the Cowboys. And they let him walk away. And then they acquired Darren McFadden. He had a 1,000-yard season. He was the bridge to Ezekiel Elliott. But Elliott, drawing the line in the sand and holding out after 3 years, that's when you do it. If you're Saquon Barkley, if you're Josh Jacobs, if you're any of these guys looking to get paid. But the problem is, like Barkley, if he had held out after 3 years, like I can't remember what the exact injury history was, but I think year 3 is when he tore his ACL. So if you hold out after year 3, what are they going to do? They're not going to blink. We've already been playing without you, and we know that the first year back from an ACL is going to be hit or miss, and it's going to take you a while to get back into form. So you're not really going to get them to quake in their boots and give you the big contract. And that injury factor is real. Austin Eckler tried to dismiss it on CBS Sports Radio, but the problem is running backs get injured at a higher rate than other positions because they're running into that mass of bodies, many of which, most of which are bigger than them. They're in the car crashes. They're getting hit from every angle. They're getting hit in awkward ways. They're falling down in awkward ways, and they're going to get injured. Emmitt Smith, one of the rare guys who would get banged up like everybody else, but kept playing through it. Marshawn Lynch. The Seahawks keep looking for the true heir to Marshawn Lynch. The problem is they can't find anybody who can keep going despite all of the inevitable injuries of the position. That's a real factor in this. And I think that adds to this idea of surplus value, because you can be a great running back. You can be a better running back by far than the next opportunity that a team may have, but if the guy can't play, it doesn't matter. All right, so that's where we are with the running back position. And I'm going to be doing some more digging about where things stand, what the running backs might be planning to do. But the key is you got to get somebody's attention who can do something about it. You got my attention. I can't do anything about it other than talk about it. You got to get the league's attention, you got to get the union's attention. You got to start a process to get your own bargaining unit. Again, they tried it 4 years ago. It didn't go very far. Do it again. Try it again. Keep pushing. You got to get somebody who stands up. They got to find an agent who takes on the charge, kind of becomes the unofficial executive director of the running backs union and becomes kind of the ringleader who's holding it all together and suggesting viable ideas and getting the running backs to go along with it. Whether it's a player or an agent, there needs to be one person who's kind of the leader for this effort. That's the only way to get the attention of the league and the union and to make something positive happen. I wanted to touch briefly on this report from Colin Cowherd, and I'm always a little skittish when somebody who isn't a reporter reports on something because, number one, I don't know how thoroughly it's been vetted, and number two, you really don't have the same skin in the game because the professional talkers can stick handle their way through whatever bullcrap they might spew as they're filling up the time that they're on the air every day. And I could see a guy like Cowherd say, if what he said yesterday about Matthew Stafford is wrong, well, that's just what I heard. I didn't say it was right or wrong. I'm just telling you what I heard. That's what I heard. Don't blame me. That's what I heard. Well, if you're going to play reporter and you're going to pass along something you heard, you're necessarily vouching for its accuracy by passing it along. And it's a dangerous, because I do that too. I mean, look, we all want to know what people are hearing. So I guess my point is this. I don't know what to make of it, but it doesn't conflict with what I had been hearing and kind of reporting. The Rams realize that they gave Matthew Stafford a contract they shouldn't have. $63 million fully guaranteed at signing last year after the Super Bowl win. $57 million more that became fully guaranteed March 17 of this year. They weren't shopping him, but they were kind of hoping someone would call. And they were hoping the Jets wouldn't settle on Aaron Rodgers and Rodgers wouldn't settle on the Jets, and the Jets would be looking and the Jets would come calling, and that didn't happen. What Cowherd reported or told us all he'd heard on Monday was that at some point the Rams went to Stafford with a request that he redo his contract. He said no, and they're frustrated about it. Now, a simple restructuring is where they just move money around and it doesn't affect in any way how much Stafford makes. I'm assuming, given that he said no and given the team was pissed about it, that they wanted him to take less, and he said, I'm not taking less. And I just wonder where it goes from here. $31 million is fully guaranteed for next year. If they would trade him after this year, they're going to have to pay some of that money. Or they're going to have to attach a draft pick to him. Right? Remember the old line, you're so ugly, your parents had to tie a pork chop around your neck to get the dog to play with you? It's kind of a pork chop trade. That's what I'm going to start calling it. It's a pork chop trade where you have to tie a draft pick around the player's neck to get another team to take him, like they did with Jared Goff, like the Texans did several years ago with Brock Osweiler. We've seen that where a team, in order to unload a player and unload his salary, sends the draft pick to the team that takes on the contract. So whether it's a pork chop trade for Matthew Stafford next year, or the Rams just have to pay a big chunk of his salary, that may be where this is headed. Because look, hey, they won a Super Bowl. That's fine. But this bill for winning the Super Bowl, it came due last year, and it's not going away. It's a multi-year price tag that they're going to pay on the back end for what they did to win that Super Bowl. And it's their own fault, because they're the ones that decided to start handing out all these contracts like proverbial, and or literal drunken sailors after winning that Super Bowl. Matthew Stafford, new contract, big new contract. Why? Cooper Kupp, big new contract. Okay. Aaron Donald, big new contract, or he was retiring. Well, maybe you just should have let him retire. What did he do last year to make a difference for your team? What's he going to do this year to make a difference for your team? You're paying him for what he's done in the past. That's the problem that the Rams have gotten themselves into. And I don't know who to blame for it. Is it McVay? Is it Les Snead? Is it Kevin Demoff? Is it Stan Kroenke? I don't know. But they have a bad habit of paying for what you've done. And we know that's not how it goes. You're paying someone for what they're going to do. Not what have you done for me lately, or what did you do for me in the past? What are you doing for me now? And what can I expect you to do for me tomorrow? And they don't pay guys that way. They pay Jared Goff for what he's done. They're paying Stafford for what he's done. They're paying Kupp for what he's done. They paid Donald for what he's done. And now they're done. And I'm done. Not with the show. Commanders, almost done. Interesting wrinkles yesterday. One, at a time when people were getting nervous that this indemnification issue between the league and Daniel Snyder was going to derail the sale to Josh Harris, Washington Post reports everything's solved. Good news. Common sense and sanity prevailed. And now it's just a matter of presumably everyone getting together on Thursday in Minneapolis for a special meeting of ownership. Finance committee will do their official vote approving the transaction. The owners will do their vote approving the transaction. And then it's ding dong, the witch is dead. I still wouldn't completely exhale. I would hold a little air in, but it sure feels like it's going to happen. Now, at the same time, and this is just typical Daniel Snyder-owned Commanders. Last year, when all the stuff in Congress was hitting the fan, and Jason Friedman, a former Commanders executive, gave information to Congress about financial irregularities, the Commanders issue a statement saying anyone who would say that is perjuring themselves. Jason Friedman, through his lawyer, said that that's a defamatory comment directed at him. And Joe Tacopina, who represented Snyder and is part of the Donald Trump defense team, Tacopina basically said, hey, if you think we defamed you, go ahead and sue. And he did yesterday, or earlier this month. It came to light yesterday that Jason Friedman is suing the Commanders, seeking $7.85 million in damages. I don't know how he came up with that number. Look, whenever you hear that someone wants whatever the number is, whatever number you hear, it doesn't matter. All that matters is what the jury eventually gives him or her. It's just a PR thing. It generates a headline. And I don't know how he came up with $7.85 million. I haven't seen the complaint yet, but it doesn't matter. It's what the jury will give him, and we'll find out. And this is something that's going to linger, and I assume it's something that will be Snyder's financial responsibility as they go forward. This isn't something Josh Harris is going to foot the bill for, but Jason Friedman suing the Commanders for defamation, and who knows what other litigation is going to arise from the latter years of Dan Snyder's tenure as owner of the Commanders. All right. Last topic before we answer a few questions. Top 10 quarterback list. Sorry. Top 10 coach list. 10, Doug Peterson. 9, Mike Vrabel. 8, Kyle Shanahan. 7, Sean McVay. 6, Sean Payton. 5, Pete Carroll. Number 4. I got 4 left. Who's left? At number 4, John Harbaugh, longtime coach of the Ravens. Got that job in 2008, has been there ever since. The Ravens contend far more often than not. They're a team that always has that feel of they're better than the sum of the parts. Harbaugh makes them better than what you think they would be. Every year, it's kind of like, their defense isn't very good going into the season. Then by the time you get to November or December, hey, their defense is pretty damn good. How did that happen? And look, offensively, who knows what it's going to be this year. Todd Monken comes in, replacing Greg Roman, and they've had a line of not great offensive coordinators. The best move as a coach that John Harbaugh ever made was firing Cam Cameron and giving the duties to Jim Caldwell during the 2012 season. That happened December-ish of 2012, and they won the Super Bowl that year. But they've had some not great offensive coordinators, and now they've got Todd Monken, whose job is to pivot more toward a passing game, and we'll see what happens. But Harbaugh always seems to motivate his players. He's got that combination of old school, new school. He's got a very old school approach, but it feels, even now, 15 years in, it feels fresh. It feels viable. It's not the kind of thing where you think, we got to reset the whole roster every once in a while. The message is going to get stale. Football is football, and John Harbaugh understands it. He knows how to coach it. He's very competitive, and he just finds a way to get the most out of whatever players he happens to have on his roster at any given time. It helps that they typically have pretty good players. I mean, between Ozzie Newsome and Eric DeCosta, they've done a pretty good job of loading the cupboard with all sorts of viable options for John Harbaugh. But he falls clearly into that category of, if he would be fired, he would instantly end up coaching somewhere else. They would be clamoring to get John Harbaugh if he became available. And, the guy who comes in at number 3, number 2, number 1, we'll find out. You'll find out. You probably have an idea of who the 3 are that are left. The question is, in what order am I putting 1, 2, and 3? So Harbaugh comes in at 4. Harbaugh deserves to be number 4. Harbaugh deserves to be the coach of the Ravens as long as he wants to be. And if they would ever decide to move on, Harbaugh would go somewhere else and make an impact right away. And he's a guy who's creeping into his 60s, but it just feels like he'll be around as long as he wants to be around. And I think that, to the extent that we say Pete Carroll is a youthful 71, Harbaugh is a very youthful 60. And I think Harbaugh is going to be a youthful 65, a youthful 70, a youthful 75, and who knows how long he'll go. He may go long enough that he's in contention to eclipse all of the records, because he's quietly put together a pretty strong career. And when you talk about longevity, and like, he never seems, I mean, he can get angry. You got to have that element where there's going to be things that piss you off, but he never seems to be worn down by it. He seems to be invigorated by it. He welcomes it. It's his lifestyle. He thrives on it. Hey, when are you going to retire? Retire from what? This is my life. This is what I do. And it's, Bill Belichick is the same way, but Belichick seems pissed off all the time. Harbaugh is a guy who's a lifer, and he's going to keep going. And he just got that. There's an effervescence to him. And I know that at times he can get pissy, and that's, you got to have that card that you play from time to time. And they say he's every bit as intense as his brother Jim. He just does a better job of keeping it under wraps. But I just get a sense that he's going to keep going, and he's going to keep going, and he's going to keep going. And whether it's the Ravens or someone else, as long as he wants to coach, he's going to have a spot in the National Football League. All right, question time. Here we go. Looking for the GIF from today. What do we got here? PFT PM Posse, have you heard any rumors about how teams are going to try to stop the heavy quarterback sneak? Also, is the play made popular by the Eagles successful due to all the rule changes which benefit the offense? Well, no, it's successful because in 2006, they removed from the rule book the rule against shoving a runner from behind. For years, you couldn't push or pull a runner. 2006, they removed the pushing aspect because it was never enforced. You'd see it out in the open field at the end of a play. Here comes a lineman, and he shoves the ball carrier a little bit farther. They never called it, ever. So they took it out of the rule book. And it only took, 16 years for teams to realize, hey, you know what? We could make this a strategic part of our offense. And I don't want to take credit or blame for it, but the day after the Thursday night game last year between the Texans and the Eagles, Peter King and I were just kind of having some fun riffing about all the things you could do. You put a defensive lineman at quarterback. You put other defensive linemen behind him. You make it an inverse tug of war where you just have a mass of humanity and they just shove their way through with all these bodies behind the one with the ball. But you get a big enough body so it doesn't get smushed by the guys behind him and the force being applied in the other direction. And then all of a sudden, it's like everybody's doing it. The Eagles mastered it, but others were doing it. In that Vikings-Bills game, the sequence of plays at the goal line when the Vikings were trying to take the lead late on the drive that was fueled by the Justin Jefferson catch. They didn't score on that drive because 4th and goal, the Vikings did a quarterback sneak. And if you saw the quarterback series, Kirk Cousins improvised that. He called that on his own, and you could tell Kevin O'Connell wasn't thrilled with it. But there was a guy behind him who tried to push him in, and it didn't work. The next play, Gabe Davis coming in motion, pushes Josh Allen from behind, and that whole timing and sequence, he fumbles the ball. Vikings recovered for a touchdown, take the lead, yada, yada. Bills tied up, Vikings win in overtime. But there were 2 plays there back-to-back where you had that element of somebody pushing the quarterback from behind. The Eagles perfected it. The NFL's keeping it in. More teams, I think, are going to use it. And look, I mean, what can you do to stop it? You can do some stuff that would be unsafe for the quarterback because you're unprotected. You're unprotected. The only rule that benefits you there is the rule against lowering your helmet to initiate contact with an opponent. You could clothesline the guy. You can hit him in the head. You just can't hit him with the top of your helmet. He's not a quarterback. He's not a passer in that situation. He's a running back. So you can have guys flying over the top of a pile. You can have guys intentionally leaping over the top, try to land on the quarterback and keep him from advancing the ball. Plus, it's a free shot at the most important player on the field. And I know that it's frowned upon now to say these things post-Bountygate, but there are coaches out there. They don't talk about it publicly. They understand the value of taking that free shot at the quarterback because surplus value, we were talking about that earlier. You go from QB1 to QB2, better chance of winning the game if you're the defense that is able, through a clean legal hit, to render that opposing quarterback incapable of continuing. PFT PM Posse, did you add Simsisms to Father of Mine in honor of Sims? Because I've noticed quite a few, like wet beyond his years. Is that what I said? I thought I said wise beyond his years. I don't know. Yeah, but one of the stupid characters, and there are plenty of stupid characters in Father of Mine, he makes one of those Simsism type statements and he's corrected. And yeah, yes, that's part of it. Simsisms and misstatements like that are always front of mind because I deal with the guy every day and my filter is constantly listening for more. But yeah, I mean, sometimes people make those statements and sometimes it's kind of funny and sometimes it isn't. All right. Drew Porter. Wait, let me one more from PFT PM Posse. Is there any event that could legitimately happen in the next 5 to 10 years that would give running backs higher average pay than kickers or leverage to get fair pay? Or will it take parents, coaches at lower levels keeping the best athletes from running back, reducing the huge supply? I mean, I really think that's the long-term solution. And whether or not there's a shorter-term solution depends upon what strength the running backs can muster among themselves to push back against the system that currently is in place. Drew Porter, is there a code of conduct for active NFL players on social media? How close to the line was Kadarius Toney when he cursed at and threatened Giants fans? I think it all falls under the personal conduct policy. And that's a good question. I was at the beach last week and one of the other writers handled it. I saw some noise about it. I think it would fall under the personal conduct policy, and there probably is a line you could cross that really would be a crime. See, that's the thing. People think that like a death threat on social media is okay. It's not the same as making a death threat to someone over the phone, or if you see them face to face, it's still something that should be prosecuted. So if you say something or do something on social media that could get you in trouble with the law, that's the kind of thing that you'd think the NFL would take action against, but it would be under the personal conduct policy. And there may be something under the personal conduct policy that would be brought up. There's a catch-all provision. When they list all the things that you can't do, there's a broad catch-all provision that in theory, the Chiefs, or more specifically, the league, could take action against Kadarius Toney if they want to. Brendan Panikar, what countries have you visited around the world? Canada. And that's it. But the Passport Project is back on. We've been talking about going to Europe next summer. And at some point, we need to go see our fans in the UK who have been very loyal, very passionate, and very adamant that we make a visit at some point. Hunter Wallace, outside of the running back market, who has the most fascinating next contract to speculate about? Either it's Mahomes or Jefferson. Jefferson probably gets $30 million a year in base. Well, it wouldn't be base, it would be total. Mahomes probably gets spread out cap charge to facilitate bigger contracts of other guys. I don't know how it's going to play out. I mean, I believe Mahomes is going to get an adjusted contract before week 1. The Vikings seem to be slow playing Justin Jefferson, which is a mistake because it's only going to be more expensive, and possibly you get yourself to a point where he decides, I'm out, I'm done. I'm curious about this angle of Jefferson becoming bait for a trade that would get the Vikings their franchise quarterback that they so desperately need after this season. That would be something if it happens. The other two that I'm watching, though, Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow. I was talking to somebody over the weekend about this. Even though I think that Burrow is on a higher level than Justin Herbert, this is a push and pull among the agencies. Athletes First has Justin Herbert. CAA has... Wait, it's the other way around. CAA has Justin Herbert. Athletes First has Joe Burrow. And there's a subtext there where I think each one is waiting for the other to go first just to set the baseline. Now, if Burrow does his deal, I don't know that Herbert has any chance of getting more, but the question is, how close can he get? And Burrow wants Herbert to go first because that sets the floor for him. See, Herbert sets the floor for Burrow. Burrow sets the ceiling for Herbert. And each guy wants, or more accurately, each guy's agency wants the other one to go first. So Burrow will know. I knew I was eventually going to do that. Burrow will know. Now the microphone's messed up. Anyway, let's see if it comes back here. Burrow will know how much he needs to get above Herbert. And Herbert will know what his absolute maximum is. And I'm going to jiggle this and try to get it to come back. I don't know what I did here, but I finally knocked the damn thing down. After 4.5 weeks of doing this with Mr. Microphone, and people complain about the lights that give people seizures, I guess. Anyway, I'm going to power through this because I have a feeling this isn't going to work. So, long story bearable. Well, now it's back. Long story bearable. Burrow is waiting for Herbert because Herbert sets the floor. Herbert's waiting for Burrow because Burrow sets the ceiling. And it's the agents who are in a deeper fight. And also, there's an opinion in the Herbert camp that maybe they have a chance of outdoing Burrow depending upon what Burrow does. So it'll be interesting to see who goes first, because at some point, somebody's got to go first. From the team's perspective, hey, we're ready to go. I think both teams are ready to go. They're waiting for the players through their agents to get to the point where the deals can be finalized. All right. James M., a.k.a. Dr. J 144. A year ago, it seemed like media and fans were questioning if Stephen Ross should be forced to sell his team, joking about tanking, tampering with Brady, etc. He has a good PR team, doesn't he? Seems like nobody is pushing for him to sell anymore. I don't think anybody was pushing for him to sell. And look, unless you're Dan Snyder and you're caught up in a controversy that gets Congress involved and just a constant string of embarrassments for the league, this other stuff, hey, I've said this before, and I'll say it again right now. The owners of the good teams like having owners of dysfunctional teams. They like having 10 to 12 teams that they know we don't have to worry about them. Stephen Ross, absentee landlord, dysfunctional team, bad decisions. We like that as the owners of the teams that know what they're doing. We like to not have to worry about the Dolphins. Now, the reality is they're kind of figuring things out under Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer. So, you know, the days of just kind of looking down your nose at the Dolphins may be over. They've put enough in place where they're overcoming whatever dysfunction Stephen Ross might try to bring to the team. Hunter Rolls, is it on the board that Jimmy Garoppolo gets cut by the Raiders if he doesn't recover from his surgery by week 1? No, I don't think what'll happen. Here's what'll happen. If he's not healthy enough to pass a physical by the time they cut the rosters at 53, they'll just put him on the physically unable to perform list. I think he'll start camp possibly, unless he's good to go, passes a physical, and is there from day 1 of camp, he'll be on the PUP list. And guys can be on the PUP list all throughout camp. When you get to the cut down day, late August, that's when you either go to the roster or you go to the PUP reserve list, where you've got to sit out 6 weeks, and then you can come back, you return to practice. There's a 3-week window, and then you either join the active roster or you go on reserve for the rest of the year. I think what's going to happen is if he's not able to pass a physical by week 1, he just stays on PUP. And then 6 weeks later, we see where he is. And the Raiders don't need to cut him because the way the contract is structured, they're not paying him anything until he's actually in position to pass a physical and play for the Raiders. Spidey 2Y Banana, what is your ideal weather for a football game? Do you enjoy when the elements play a role in the game plan, or would you rather have it be a reduced non-factor? I mean, we all love a snow game. We all love a snow game. It looks great. A snow game looks great. And it's so rare that we just embrace it when we see it. But yeah, ideally, you don't want weather to be a factor at all. You want it to be a cool, dry day or night. And the less the weather is a factor in a game, the better. All right, probably need to wrap this up. Been going almost an hour. I'm just looking for any others that could be interesting. Judson Gerbler, since you predicted Aaron Donald could get traded, what are the chances the Rams will get Caleb Williams? Well, they got to have enough ammunition that they could trade. Would Aaron Donald be part of it? Depends on who they're doing the trade with. Because Aaron Donald, even though I don't think he has a no trade clause, I mean, he's not going to go to any team he doesn't want to go to, and no one's going to, because he'll just retire. I think after this season, either retires or gets traded to a team he wants to go to. And I think he wants to get back in the vicinity of Pittsburgh, whether it's Pittsburgh or Baltimore or Cleveland or Cincinnati or New York or, somewhat closer, maybe even the Eagles, a lot closer to home than he currently is, because that's a 7-month or so where you're away from where he wants to be. And I think he's at the point, and I think this is why this happened last year. He just wants to be closer to Pittsburgh. And after this year, I think he's going to get there. All right. I should probably wrap this up. If I didn't get to your question today, try it again tomorrow. Appreciate some of your time. As always, again, just 6 days away from the return of PFT Live. 3 more editions of PFT PM. I kind of like the idea of doing PFT PM, not simply when there's news that breaks late afternoon, late morning, early afternoon, whenever, after PFT Live goes off the air. I kind of like the idea of just, popping in from time to time. And I always say I'm going to do that. And then once I get into the PFT Live grind, once my routine changes again, it's kind of like, 2 hours in the morning is enough. Unless there is something that happens. We've been doing that in recent years. We'll do an emergency PFT PM where we address whatever it is. We bring the content to you. We give you our opinions and our takes, and then we flesh things out further the next morning on PFT Live. So you can count on PFT Live every morning, 7 to 9 Eastern, starting on Monday. And maybe once we get through this week of PFT PM, we'll see it a little more often. We'll take that under advisement. And with that, I'll say thank you. See you back here again on Wednesday. Check us out around the clock at easy for him to say, profootballtalk.com. Have a great Tuesday. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.